Well, it's Pride Month, and this is the month starting on June 1st, where we acknowledge those individuals who identify with the LGBTQ community. Many of them have struggled to gain equal rights within and to overcome adversity and discrimination. So during the month of June, which is observed as Pride Month, members of the LGBTQ community and allies raise awareness about the issues that members of this community continue to face. Now, Pride Month was observed or is observed in June to honor the anniversary of the Stonewall Uprising, a touchstone event in LGBTQ history. In the late 1960s, being openly gay, if you're old enough to remember, was largely prohibited in most places. New York, in particular, had a rule that the simple presence of someone gay or genderqueer counted as disorderly conduct, effectively outlawing gay bars and effectively making it an offense for which an individual could be arrested. Well, on June 28th, 1969, patrons of the Stonewall Inn, a popular bar with a diverse LGBTQ clientele, stood their ground after police raided the establishment. The resulting clash led to days of riots and protests known as the Stonewall Uprising. It was shortly thereafter that June became recognized as Pride Month. Now, the number of American adults who identify as LGBTQ has more than doubled in the last 12 years. Now, this is according to polling from Gallup. According to that polling, 7.6% of U.S. adults now align themselves with the LGBTQ community. Now, that's up from 3.5% in 2012 when Gallup started collecting this data. And it's compared that to 4 years ago when that figure was just 5.6%. So today we are celebrating Pride. We're recognizing Pride. The month of June is Pride Month. We are saluting those pioneers of the Pride movement who stood their grounds in that nightclub in New York, who stood up to say that they would no longer be ostracized or criminalized simply because of their sexual preferences. And during this month, we're going to talk to a number of folks who identify as LGBTQ to really get a better understanding of what that community continues to experience by way of adversity and discrimination. Joining me in this hour are Shayla and Michael Hunter-Lawson. They are a recently married couple. They both identify as queer individuals, and they're going to tell us their story, what it's been like to identify as Black queer people, and some of the challenges that they have faced, particularly as it relates to securing adequate health care. When we come forward, right here on KBOA Talk 15, we're going to salute those in the LGBTQ community and Pride Month, as well as learn the story of Shayla and Michael Hunter-Lawson. Welcome back, my friend Shayla. I know I miss you. It's so great to have you back. I know you've been away, you've been handling your business, so it's just good to be reunited with you, and welcome to the show. Michael, wow, Shayla, it's been a while, and so much has happened with you since we last were together on this show together, including your marriage. You and Michael got married. So let's start there. Let's start with when you got married and tell us the circumstances around your marriage.
Yeah, and I will start by saying that I am still currently a professor at Amherst College, but we came across a really difficult situation, a rock and a hard place, where I would love to go back to teaching, but I've dealt with a lot of health issues, and that's where me and Michael's romance began. I had moved back home to my hometown of Lexington, Kentucky, so that I could recover and revitalize. And in that process, I just happened to meet my soulmate, someone who's seen me through so many different obstacles. I'd love to hear you talk about like our love and how we met. And yeah.
Well, it was crazy that we even met on online app, and then this was perfect. I guess it was just Lexington. You know, you never really expect whatever you're going to get, but I've found my soulmate, which was amazing. It's been great
And one of
every
the,
day.
yeah. Oh, and I was going to say, one of the things we've always aligned on is just our real love of human rights and healthcare. And so Michael works as a healthcare worker.
Mm.
We're both artists. And so when we started thinking about getting married, we thought about it as a long-term plan, but we had a lot of reservations because being part of the queer community, there's so many reasons, just the fact that with Michael growing up with his mom being a Black lesbian, there wasn't the opportunity for her to be able to use these institutions. But then we looked at what our situation was. We have also both dealt with some really severe healthcare situations, and at a point where I was losing my healthcare insurance because of the fact that with my medical conditions, I haven't been able to return to teaching. I've been put on an unpaid leave that's indefinite. We started staring down the barrel of what would it mean for us to continue our lives and what is that going to look like. And so we started looking at marriage, but how can we look at marriage as a protest? I love the fact that you mentioned um, the riots that began Pride. A lot of times we forget that Pride was a protest. And so in planning our marriage, we started to think about how could we also use it as a statement of what it means to love somebody, the fact that love saves lives. And Pride was the perfect opportunity for us to be able to tie the knot and to say that.
Let's step back a minute, Shayla, because you identify as a queer woman. Is
Mhm.
that accurate?
I identify as a queer, non binary Black woman. And the reason why I make the differentiation is because we as Black people have always been denied access to the binary. The binary was created in order to say that we don't fit. And so for me, I like saying, I like taking that. I like the ways that I don't fit. And so Black women will always be my designation. But when it comes to the world, I'm a non binary person. I don't fit in the ways that they want me to. And that's actually kind of lovely.
And for a lot of people, Shayla, they don't understand what it means when you say you are non binary, because I think when people hear the word queer, they automatically assume that as a female, born as a female at least, you are a lesbian. So help us understand that distinction. And did you ever yourself identify as a Black lesbian?
Yeah, I think it's also the perfect reason for why exactly that we're here. Michael, would you like to talk about as like dating a non-binary person coming out of a queer family, like
They, them, no, she, or any of that. There's specific distinctions that makes it a little bit different, and that, you know, just to be open.
yeah.
It's not whatever the general population that even they talk about, but
Yeah, I think it's a lot simpler than people often make it because for me, when we thought about like our spiritual goals and
mm,
how we wanted to think about building a family, one of the things that we thought about is really wanting to go back and align with the cultures that we came out of. And in most of West Africa, we have languages where they, them is how everybody is received. So if we were to go back home, that would be the way that we would first be addressed as opposed to she or he. And it's part of the journey that we want to be on. We decided to take our vows as they, them. We have a queer therapist who also guides us. In terms of me being a Black lesbian, like that is a distinction that I love to leave to the pros. Like, I have such high respect for Black lesbians as a culture and the things that they've committed to, the things that they have challenged in this world. But queerness is about the kind of fluidity that we as Black people have always had. We have always loved in really big, multitudinous ways. And it doesn't necessarily mean having to have any kind of intimate physical relations with one type of person or a different type of person. You know, we're committed to the idea that love is big and you never know where it's going to hit you or how many times.
So just trying to understand that, and again, helping folks who may be new to some of these terms and may be new to some of these concepts. Again, I think generally when the term queer is used, people are thinking about a woman that sexually is attracted to other women, or a man that is attracted to other men. And you're saying, Shayla, that that is not the common definition of queer, or it is, but that you broaden that definition out. I'm just trying to, again, make sure folks that are listening and watching really understand, because I think there's a lot of misinformation about what it means to be a queer, obviously, and what it means to be non-binary, just from some of the comments that I often get from people when they are first meeting someone that has one or more of those identifications.
Queer is about imagination. And so there is so much beyond the imagination that is just the idea of falling in love with one type of person or one person who fits one particular definition. So when we say queer, we're looking at the gamut of just what is possible in love. You know, we're examining things just from the root up in terms of, do we want a partnership that represents the idea that marriage is a man and a woman? You know, we recognize that on every front, we have the physicality of like a normal, like hot guy and girl that you would see in the street. But then when you come home with us and you see the ways that we live and the ways that we have conversations and the ways that we build our altar and the ways that we talk through problems, you know, it's not the typical hierarchy. Something that I had to learn, for instance, is that James Baldwin, throughout his career, repeatedly referred to himself as queer. And people, and even for me, like as a scholar, I learned this when I was preparing a lecture for the James Baldwin conference, because I thought that he was just being a man of his time and he was afraid to take on the label of being gay. And then I realized that one of the novels that nobody ever reads is a novel he wrote in 1968, where it was just a bunch of 20-somethings that were loving and living and figuring things out and, you know, having same-sex makeout sessions or stealing each other's girlfriends and it being okay. And that's the world that we live in. You know, that's the wonderful rainbow world that we're collaborating to exist in. You know, we're asking ourselves the big fundamental questions about, how can love be a statement? How can love be a movement? And the first way that we chose to do that was by saying that marriage can mean more to queer people than just the idea of getting the acceptance, the cultural acceptance of saying that your love is valid. It's something that as a disabled person, we don't get that kind of validation very often. There's the expectation that disabled people are just supposed to take whatever is allotted to them. And that if you ask for too much intersectionally, which is a big deal these days, that if you start telling people that you're Black, queer, and disabled, they just, you know, like, how many boxes do you need to check? Like, how many things do we need to be paying attention to? But here we are, you know, Michael and I are two Black, queer, disabled people who happen to be also madly in love, who also have the opportunity to get married in America. And we can do it in a way where we can say something that's different, you know, like we decided to get married because it was the only opportunity we had to keep my heart beating. I was up against the gun in terms of what my medical prospects were. I go through an upwards of like 6 surgeries a year. So for someone like me, losing my health insurance, which I would have done on June 30th, would have been fatal. And we had all of these reservations around the idea of like, here's this institution that isn't really meant to represent Black people. That's really not meant to represent queerness. You know, what do we want to do with that? And so the best thing that we could do is say, you know what, love saves lives. And so that became our project and our mission. We love making art together. And so we look at our marriage as an installation art project. We had a little guerrilla ceremony. Nobody expected us to have a wedding that day. We just showed up with the flowers and the friends and the family. And we said, hey, like, it was the first place we met, the first place we ever had a date.
Full
and
circle.
Full circle.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Michael. I know you and Shayla said that you grew up with a Black queer mother.
Yes.
What was that experience like? I don't know how old you are, but I'm assuming you grew up in the 70s or 80s. Uh, and I don't know what town you were in, or what environment you were in, but did you experience as a child of a Black queer or Black gay mother discrimination, or did you get treated differently because of your mother?
Yes, actually. I'm in the 90s actually, but a little bit a little bit younger.
I'm
Yep.
sorry.
But
Okay.
no, you're fine. You're fine. And it was Maryland actually, because grew up in Maryland most of the time, between Howard County or in between. Um, it was actually not only the outside of just public, but also family. Family, just difference of ideas and ideals of what you're supposed to do, or what's normal or what's expected, which is how can you what is that?
Well, I assume at some point your mom had a relationship with a man, your father, either
Yes.
marriage or some kind of partnership. So when did your mom, or when did you learn that your mom was lesbian?
When I was young. Yeah, we actually had a sat and talked in the car back from, what is it, from school or something like that, and we had this conversation and sat down of where her mind was and who she is.
Mhm.
Is just just being transparent, which is all you could ask for anyone.
And you said you did experience some kind of different treatment or disparate treatment, even from your family. What was that treatment like? What was the reaction? I want to talk about the reaction from your family towards your mom's, I'll call it, coming out. And then I want to talk to you about what your mom's experiences and lived experiences, how they may have impacted your decision making, and how you identify uh, today as a Black male, born a male, but who now identifies as non-binary, and as a queer non-binary. When we come forward, I want to continue this conversation with Shayla Hunter-Lawson and Michael Hunter-Lawson. They are a Black queer couple, recently married, and they are here because we are celebrating Pride, and we're celebrating their marriage. They just got married, so again, congratulations to both of you on that. And they're helping us explain to folks who oftentimes don't quite understand what it means to be queer, and particularly, as Shayla said, Black, queer, and disabled in this country. What are some of the challenges that they face, and how can we as a society ensure that they don't experience any kind of discrimination because of choices that they've made? What was that like, and what did your family say or do as they learned that your mom identified as lesbian?
Just not the support, or even give the time to love whatever she wants to. It's a hard place to even to fathom, I guess, the idea that you couldn't do being you, whatever that would be different, or just unavailable. But it is important. It is important in that someone did, I guess, for their flowers to sprout, I guess, to give someone to have their wings. They're bigger than the world, and they should give everything they should.
I know, Michael, you at this point identify as queer. Was there ever a period in your life where you identified as a gay man?
Gay man, as maybe just looking, just being open. I mean, I love and being open to different people, but sexual, no.
And Shayla, talk about some of the challenges, obstacles, adversities, and even discrimination that is prevalent in the LGBTQ community.
Yeah, we don't get enough opportunities to talk about how big the LGBTQ community is, because part of the reason why queerness as a definition even appealed to me, I don't like the idea of saying strange about any any part of who I am. But becoming a person who was more visibly disabled, I always say that for a long time, like I did a really good cosplay of a non-disabled person, of a normal person, you know. And then meeting Michael, meeting someone who was dealing with the same challenges. So Michael is a stroke survivor. And I, dealing with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, had dealt with a lot of like neurological, neurocognitive stuff. So we deal with a lot of the same kind of brain fog. And then Michael also survived burns across 50% of his arms. So has been
Mm.
through a lot of medical procedures. So when we first started dating, like a lot of our first dates were my hospital visits. You know, he was the person who was taking the videos for the neurologist so that they could try and figure out what kind of neurological disorder I developed from the EDS. He's the one who holds my hand when they stick giant ass needles in my arm for my PRP treatment. And a lot of this sounds strange when we think about what straight love is usually defined as. Like for us, queer community is about the fact that we're willing to hold each other through some strange times. You know, it's not about who we kiss, it's not about who we fall in love with, it's about who's got your back. It's about how wide those people are starting to think about themselves. So we have all sorts of ways for talking about who we might be. But like one of like the person that when I think about the movement that I most closely align with, that both of us like love, is Marsha P. Johnson, because she was a Black trans woman who was at the forefront of Stonewall. She was there leading the protests, holding the signs, you know, and it's such like a perfect amalgam of who the two of us are, you know, like someone who was born a Black male in this country and then raised a Black woman, you know. And when we think about our relationship, we're really interested in divine alignment. We love the god Mawu Lisa from West African tradition because it is a god that is half female, who's like literally like a female who is like 10 years older than the male counterpart. And that's how we see our love, is that god of creation that we were first set out to be. We love like the romantic, like out of the box, starry ways of thinking about Blackness that queerness allows, because it doesn't revolve around the rigidity of like, well, who do you want to be in bed with? You know, we want a big, wide bed that services everybody, because a lot of times, you know, when you're sick, you need your friends to be there. You need your friends to be able to see you in complicated and complex situations. And those are the things that we often miss when it comes to conversations about what queer community is. It's one of the things that I've always loved about teaching the next generation, is the fact that these are all the concerns that they have, especially coming in a post-COVID world. So many more of us, 64% of the United States identifies as disabled, you know? And if we start annexing these definitions of not just who looks at themselves as queer, but also like who looks at themselves as disabled and who looks at themselves as being BIPOC activists, start seeing that there's a lot of overlap in the rainbow sector of the people who are at the front of movements. The Black Lives Matter movement was started by queer Black women. You know, if we just go down the list, constantly Black people who also identify as queer are at the front of a lot of our conversations. But we don't always get the shine for being able to talk about that. We get the shine for the other things that we do that are magnificent, but not the ways that we're open to receiving people for all that they are and how they want to present in the world. So one of our biggest goals is to start thinking about imagination. You know, we're going to Costa Rica in a few months so that we can buy ourselves a little plot of land and start thinking about how to build institutions that foster health and imagination and wellness. And we love the idea of how can we partner and who can we build with, and what can we make. And that's what marriage opened up for us, because it gave us the opportunity to plan longer. It assured that I would be able to stay on this earth longer to make beautiful things.
And you know, obviously, whenever you find your soulmate, that is a beautiful thing. So again, congratulations to the two of you on finding each other and getting married. I'm somewhat still shocked, I guess, when you read about the Stonewall uprising, the fact that in the late 1960s, it was still prohibited in many places in the US to be openly gay. Gay people had to hide their identities, their sexuality. And I look back to the special that Gerard Carmichael did for HBO when I think it was a couple years ago, he did an HBO special. He's a comedian. And he came out in some ways, what we call coming out on that special, but he also talked about the difficulties as a Black man, getting rebuked by his mother, who was very religious, who said what he represented was against God and against her religion, and she couldn't accept him. His brother saying that he never wanted a gay brother, and really talked about breaking the news of being gay to his best friend, and his best friend saying he never wanted again to have a gay guy as his best friend. It was supposed to be a comedy. It was very dark, very, in many ways, it was difficult for me to watch because it was clear how much pain he experienced in having this turmoil, internal turmoil, coming to grips with the fact that he was gay after having he talked about going on dates and trying to have sex with a female and all these things he did to deny his sexuality. When we come forward, I want to talk about, is Gerard Carmichael's experience, is that real for a lot of people who are members of the LGBTQ communities? Shayla, I was asking about Gerard Carmichael. I don't know if you saw that HBO comedy special, meant to be a comedy, but to me was pretty dark because it just showed the pain and the hardship he experienced in coming to grips with his sexuality and then having to face his family and friends who were not very welcoming of him as he talked about being a Black gay man. Is that a reality for a lot of members of the LGBTQ community, or do you think that was an isolated incident for Gerard?
Yeah, there's just so much shame. Like we talk about it all the time, with Michael being a Black male. Yeah.
I think there's a lot of backlash. I think there are a lot of people highbrow, just look at it differently and just see it as what it is rather than looking at the whole book. Just look at the cover, looking at the surface. They don't actually let them be them. Just freedom, the flexibility. Love always trumps all.
And it's so and it's so complicated because so much of the ways that we think about ourselves as Black people, so many of the reasons that we have so much shame when it comes to sex and sexuality is because of what happened to our bodies and the ways that our bodies were taken from us and queered in a certain sense. I've always loved the amount of scholarship that we've built around the idea that we are the foundations of queerness. Like if there's anybody who has to be proud for Pride, it's us because of all the massive things that we've accomplished. But we also, it's this attitude of like, well, you're already weird enough. Like, why do you need to be any weirder?
There's always a bar.
There's always this bar. And that makes it incredibly complicated because then you have to think, well, do I want to be a part of the Black community or do I want to be a part of this community over there? When in reality, the whole reason why it's important to us to come out and be as visible as we can be in our love is to be able to say that queerness can look a lot of different ways. You can look at somebody walking down the street and just see a Black man and a Black woman and have absolutely no idea how they address each other or identify when it comes to being at home. And that's been a real surprise for us as well, because we also deal with the average everyday problems. In the first hour, we heard you talking a lot about abortion rights, and that was a lot of what we had to come across when it came to the decision that I recently had to have a major surgery. One of my doctor's biggest concerns is that with us living in a red state, it would be his exact words are, do you know it would be deadly for you to get pregnant? And with me having a joint tissue disorder where all of my reproductive organs, which I wasn't planning on using to begin with, but now, we're up against the gun as a couple in this different way. We already knew that we weren't interested in raising a traditional family. We are happy dog parents. But then we have to think about what the government has to say about our love in all sorts of aspects, including, what it would mean for us to be in a situation where we had to make that choice, and having those conversations. And what does it mean for us as a queer couple to say that we're trying to make a choice about whether or not we want to have a baby in this weird institutional setting, and then to talk about what it means for me to remove my reproductive organs in order for that to make more freedom and to make more liberty and possibility for our world. And those are the things that often we don't get the chance to think of. We don't get the chance to think about ourselves as whole people. It's just the cover.
Right.
We need people to start reading the book.
Do you think things are changing? Obviously, there's been a lot of change in attitudes. There's been a lot of changes in laws since that that Stonewall event that happened in New York in the late 1960s. But again, I go back to Gerard Carmichael because things change, but in some ways things remain the same. And particularly in the Black community, Shayla, as a scholar, I know you are acutely aware of some of the more conservative attitudes that Black church folk have, people who consider themselves very religious, oftentimes have created a narrative of being unwelcoming to African Americans, even in their own family, that come out as gay or come out as trans or members of the LGBTQ community. But do you see any shifts to suggest that people are becoming more receptive, more welcoming, more understanding of the LGBTQ community?
Yeah. And I feel like we are the shift. We are the movement, just Michael and myself, but the direction that the movement is flowing, that there is so much more fluidity with the ways that Black people imagine themselves now than there ever has been. I mean, who would have imagined, in the time of the Stonewall riots, that you would have, a daily broadcast in which you got to talk about progressive news topics from across the world? That didn't exist. And part of the reason that exists is because there were people who were willing to do progressive things, like Marsha P. Johnson, and toppling over fire hydrants at the Stonewall riots. For us, our marriage represents the same kind of thing. That there are so many ways to be activists. There are so many ways to show your pride. And there are so many ways to be in conversation with what it means to change the world. It's not often that you get to say that marriage can be a protest, that marriage can be an opportunity to say, you know what? These institutions have ways of believing that we are invisible and that we are invaluable, but love gives us the opportunity to say we are valuable. Love changes the world. And that's exactly what pride is about. It's not just about who you love, it's about how you love yourself. Like being able to say that you're queer is not about who you decide is your partner, It's really about how you want to be a partner to yourself and how you want to be a partner to the world. And because nobody, when we were little kids, nobody questioned whether or not we were straight. We didn't have to kiss anybody. We didn't have to, have a crush on anybody, although we might have, or we did, but nobody asked us to do those things to prove that we were straight people. And that's why queerness for us is a big part of our marriage, is because we're open to the imagination of what these years are going to bring for us. And we're really excited about it.
What can people do, Michael, in your estimation, who maybe don't know very many people who are in the LGBTQ community, who are trying to learn about that community? This is Pride Month, the month of June. What do you recommend, or any recommendations you can give to anybody that wants to learn more about this community, or somehow educate themselves, raise awareness, or be involved in any of the numerous nonprofit organizations that work on behalf of the community?
To get in the community and all that kind of stuff, I think there are plenty of avenues to just try to learn yourself, or learn, I guess, to be aware that everyone around us, just to be in touch. It's hard to tell what they're looking for, or and all that kind of stuff. But if you just have the question, you should always just have the question and then have someone to get an answer. Somewhere you feel safe and secure.
Hmm. And I know, Shayla, you mentioned that you all are headed to Costa Rica to buy a piece of land. Again, congratulations on that. But what else will you and Michael do during Pride Month to continue to raise awareness and to, as you said, demonstrate to the world the vastness of queerness?
Well, we're definitely headed to our own local Pride celebration. We've been talking about our costumes. And we're
What
also
are they? Share them. What are your costumes?
Are you comfortable with us sharing?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Why not?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, I just wanted to check. So, we talked about, so Michael is going to wear a ball gag and a gimp mask. So some really like interesting kink stuff, but with like the most normcore man kind of out, khakis, black shirt. But the black shirt says black is non-binary.
Mhm.
And I will be holding a nice little chain. And at the end of it, I will be wearing, what was your choice?
It was some camos.
Yeah,
So,
army
yeah,
fatigues.
some uniforms and all that kind of stuff.
So I get to be the powered lesbian of my dreams.
I think
Okay.
it's to just
And
be against the grain.
Yep.
so you'll be going to your local Pride parade. Anything else that you're going to do as a couple to acknowledge Pride Month?
Absolutely. We're going to be doing a couple of events in July. One with Harriet's Bookshop on July 19th, which will be a Phyllis Wheatley celebration. We will also be doing an event at Busboys and Poets on July 21st, which will be an opportunity for community protest and organizing. So bring your favorite organization to rep and share it with people. And we'll also be continuing to get out the story of our marriage and ways that we can look at institutions helping us and serving us. Because another thing that we just really like people to get out of the idea of us tying the knot, priding the knot in order to save each other's lives is you can just be two people who love each other. You can just be two people who love each other enough to get married and make sure that the other person has the benefits, has the safety, has the things that they need. There are ways to organize in community that can be as small as two people.
Absolutely. Well, I am so glad that we had this chance to reconnect. I am happy to hear that. I know you've had some health challenges, but you look fantastic.
Well,
You sound fantastic. So I'm hoping that the worst is behind you and that the best is yet to come. All my best in your honeymoon phase. Continue to enjoy each other. This is a really special time in a marriage is those early months, those early years. And I wish you both the best. We will continue to celebrate Pride throughout the month of June. Again, thank you to Shayla and Michael for sharing your love story with us right here on KBLA Talk 1580.